So the astrology of this week is 5 July 2021 through 11 July 2021 has Venus and Saturn perfecting this opposition. I'm calling it the dark romantic opposition of Venus and Saturn, which then makes way to this kind of lovely new moon in Cancer that we can abide in with a sense of playfulness this week, because there is that symbol embedded in the skies. So let's get into the charts. Welcome to this week of astrology. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be in another week, and just seeing every week when I prepare these, it's like there's always just a nice cohesive, I feel like, narrative that the astrology gives us, and it's ever changing. That's what I was just thinking about, how the shifts are almost unpredictable. And while we have a difficult week, for example, last week with that T-square in fixed signs, and Mars and Saturn perfecting an opposition with Uranus as well, squaring, we have a little bit of a softer week this week. The astrology does lighten up, and in a week when there's a new moon, which is symbolically the birth of a new phase, I think it's quite good energy to kind of come down, finish that moon's waning cycle, and then birth a new Cancer phase for the next 2 weeks with this syzygy, the 2-week syzygy cycle as a way to reset the energy. This is one of the better syzygies we've had in terms of what it offers, with so much dignity with the ruling planets and with Mars and Saturn really not being involved. So that's what we're going to talk about this week. As it relates to this week's astrology, let me just go ahead and dive in here and jump in. And here you go, here you see it, that these two major aspects. So the first one comes in on Wednesday. Saturn and Venus perfect this opposition, and they're opposites. It's the benefic planet of the night sect, so this is Venus, opposing the malefic planet of the day sect, which is Saturn. And Saturn is very cold, isolated. Venus is warm and about togetherness. And so there's these opposites within the significations of the planets that are really, I think, going to be felt this week when they make a geometric opposition. I have here tension of opposing energies, but this is the thing, with tension we get breakthroughs, and I'm going to go into this a little bit later, but the polarities, actually the push and pull, are what allows us to find that groove or that balance or that place along the gradation of energy that we feel most comfortable. And that's what when an opposition gets pure and perfects like this, it can kind of clarify where do we want to be in terms of the symbols here along this continuum of the Saturnian versus the Venusian. And then we have here, and I'm going to talk about both these charts. So the 10 July 2021, this will be on Saturday, very early. Both of these are early in the AM in Central Europe. So that will be the evening on Tuesday and the evening on Friday, if you are in North America. But we get this new moon very early in the AM on Saturday, the 10th of July, this new moon in Cancer, and it's the only new moon with Jupiter in Pisces. And that's not too rare, because Jupiter only lasts for a year in every sign, roughly. And so you really get one new moon most years. It's one new moon in a sign and one full moon in a sign, though there are some rare occasions, I think about once a year, once every 18 months, where you have two syzygies of the same type in the same sign during the same season. So you would get two full moons in Leo, which I think we have this year coming up. Two new moons in Leo. We'll talk all about that when it happens. So let me come back here. So here we go. It's the new moon with Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter very strong in Pisces, and that's a water trine relationship. So there's some real sweetness here, and only once every 12 years do we have Jupiter in that overcoming position, really able to flood the sign of Cancer with its powers. And we get that now. We get that right now. So I think there's a hope here. There's an opportunity to tap into the needs that we have and hope around those needs with respect to home, comfort, and nurture. So I'll go into all of that. But that's what the moon is, and that's what Cancer is. It's the the comfort that we seek in the people that provide that comfort to us. And Jupiter is a planet of hope, abundance, and sort of expansion in a beneficent way. So this interchange is a real opportunity to birth something new here on the weekend, early Saturday or late Friday in North America. And I'm loving it for this week. I'm just loving this energy. So let's shift now. I'm going to now talk about the moon and what the moon's doing. So we start out with the Taurus moon, just to finish last week. As I'm recording this, we still have a Taurus moon. The moon gives way and enters Gemini on the 6th, very early in the morning, so on Monday evening in North America. But again, the week starts with the moon in a fixed sign and ends with the moon in a fixed sign. And so the moon will be triggering the Mars-Saturn opposition both to begin the week and end the week, just like last week. And so the middle of the week periods actually have more easy astrology, maybe more easygoing, and astrology that's a little bit more easy to deal with just looking at the moon's transits. And that Gemini moon's nice. Mercury's still there. Mercury's still very strong in Gemini. Mercury's moving forward now and actually comes out of the sun's beams this week. I don't have the exact day on that, but Mercury, let me just check that now. Let me just pull up Solar Fire. Let's just quickly do that, because why not? One of the great advantages, I think I always say this, but having Solar Fire available, and I can just pull it up here. So here's the clock. Here we are on the 4th of July. You see I've got my wheel with all of those dwarf planets and some of the other interesting planetary points that I sometimes look at. Let's put the classic planets on. A little easier to read, you can see that. By the way, it's one of the reasons why I mainly rely on the 7 traditional planets and the nodes and the angles, because of the clarity of a chart when you read it. There's sort of a simplicity there. I don't ignore the other, I don't categorically deny them, but I really like the simplicity of a chart like this. And this is the language of astrology as it was constructed around these points. And so it's kind of a simplified, is maybe not, you could say simplified in a way, a simplified form of astrology, but it's kind of the pure form of astrology. I'm trying to think of an analogy. Sometimes when you strip away with only a smaller alphabet, like there's some languages, Korean is a good example. I think they developed their alphabet, it has even less letters than the English language. And they made this alphabet, you can learn it very quickly, and there's a real power in simplifying the letters because of the ability to teach and spread a language. So I feel like with the 7 traditional planets, there's a great power in simplifying your language so that you can communicate. There's a certain directness and a power that comes with a smaller and a kind of restricted linguistic, symbolic option in terms of the letters, or the things we're using to construct the so-called words in the astrological context. So that's a whole long topic, and I've got a lot of thoughts on it. But I just wanted to share that because you saw me take away these 7 traditional planets, or the outer planets and planetary points and dwarf planets and several other things. So, okay, let me just come back in here. So here we are right now. So Mercury is actually, as we speak, it's about a 15-degree range. Now, Mercury is visible. Mercury is now a morning star. So you're probably able to see Mercury now, whereas last week it wasn't. This took place sometime this week that Mercury came out from under the sun's beams. But so let me come back now. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. This was my point here, was that with the moon and Mercury, you see you've got this, the Mercury RX story, the Mercury retrograde story is over. Mercury's now direct, moving faster and outside of the sun's beams and a morning star. It's been reborn in the underworld, purified by that being in the heart of the sun, and now can start acting in our favor, hopefully. And especially in a day sect sign of Gemini. Now, a morning star, Mercury, in the day sect domicile, I think is even extra auspicious because it's matching the sect of the sign. And you think about here, what do we do with Mercury out in the world? This is business and trade and selling and buying and performance and writing, maybe publishing writing or engaging on Twitter. If you are so inclined. Twitter, there's a lot that you can learn in terms of engaging and asking questions. People are very friendly. So, you know, wherever you exchange ideas in conversation, this might be a time to be more outwardly engaged with that. Well, we have this very powerful Mercury, morning star in its day-sect domicile. But then the eclipses are done, right? We had the full moon in Capricorn. Now we get the first new moon syzygy, the first, you know, reset of the lunation cycle with a new moon since eclipse season. And so I think this is a kind of an extra renewal moment here on Saturday. And I think that this moon's transit, even though it's before the new moon and we're waning into that new moon, it does give us some goodness in terms of being able to use that Mercury with the moon activating it midweek here. This will be Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the moon comes into Cancer on Thursday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and some of Thursday, you know, settling into hump day, that is actually Mercury's days in the astrological system. We'll be able to, I think, you know, capitalize here, so-called, on this power of Mercury to do mercurial things. And then the moon comes into Leo, like I said here. This would be on Sunday, very early in the AM. So Saturday in North America. And then that Mars-Moon conjunction happens opposite Saturn. So I'm looking for maybe another kind of tense weekend, potentially. But some great energy midweek here. That's the theme of these lunar transits. Let's go now to the first chart I want to look at. This is the Saturn Venus opposition. And there's actually some really interesting stuff about this chart, because actually, sorry, this is not the Saturn Venus opposition, excuse me. Tuesday, I wanted to pull, what I'm doing now is I'm kind of trying to reorder this a little bit so there's some logic to it. It's the planets and the planetary transits, the moon's transits, and then I'm gonna just go through the charts I want to look at in chronological order. So the first chart here comes up on Tuesday, 4 p.m. here in Central Europe. And this is it's one candidate for the chart of the week, or the moon's transit of the week. There's two that I have. It'll be this Gemini moon is interesting, and I think active and useful. And then that new moon moment. So maybe not really, you want to get right on that new moon, because when the moon is within 1 degree of the sun, it's in a special condition called it being in the heart of the sun. And so I like so-called new moon rituals. You see people tweeting about that, or on Instagram, maybe sharing about it. We have a great new moon for something like that, but try to get it as close to the exact timing. You don't want to do that new moon ritual, let's say 4 or 5, 7, half a day after or before, because the moon is not visible and it's blocked. The best time is either right during that new moon moment, or when that moon becomes young and it's newly visible. It's that young moon. But I think this is a great opportunity. So those are both my transits of the week, but let's look at this here. So the moon is bona fide in this moment. It'll be separating from a square with Jupiter and Pisces, that overcoming square, but it's applying to a sextile to Venus and Leo. So the last aspect was to Jupiter, the next aspect is to Venus. And this bonification condition that I often talk about, you want to have the moon within 7 degrees of the separating planet and the applying planet. You get that here really about 3 degrees, 3-4 degrees in Gemini, and extending into about 8 degrees. And there's actually 2 lunar mansions here, and we'll look at, but I want to just say, the reason why I'm sort of ambivalent about this transit is it's very close to that north node. And even though some traditions like placing the moon with the north node, because this is the ascending node, the moon will now be rising above the ecliptic upon crossing the north node. It still is maybe an over-exuberant to the point of destabilization style energy. You know, this is the great hungry ghosts. You've heard this analogy in Buddhist circles, that we can never satiate. You know, these are ghosts that maybe don't have a stomach, so they just keep eating. And you know, I would encourage you, especially here in Gemini with a strong Mercury during this moment, to just watch out for over-exuberance, maybe even overthinking. This could be a mania transit. And I don't mean that in the clinical sense. I mean this in the more literary sense of just a lot of energy, and maybe too much energy, where there's just too much happening, okay? So let's come down here to the lunar mansion. So I think the moon does get bona fide in the mansion before that, the 5th lunar mansion, which is very good for trading and buying and selling in business. I highlighted the 6th because we'll have more of this bona fide moon in this 6th lunar mansion. And you can see here, this is the lunarium.co.uk website that I love so much. This is a mansion good for love and friendship, relationships, business, making alliances. Attraction is its essence. Warnock signifies love, friendship, and affection. It can indicate the imminence of a new friendship or love, or the intensification of current relationships. So imminence here, I guess it's that there is a birth of a something new in terms of friendship or love coming here. And so just think about this theme. Let's just think about connection and relationships and play and fun and attraction and affection. These are all positive, sort of lighthearted energies, especially the new phase of any kind of relationship. It's very playful and fun. You may be spending time with a person, doing fun things, or enjoying meals and things. I mean, it's a phase of relationship, even friendship, where you're out exploring together. Then it settles into maybe a more serious phase, and then kind of that stayed, deeper, you know someone so much, you just sit together and don't even have to say anything. But this is those early kind of attraction, playful moments. So I like that here for Tuesday with this bona fide moon in Gemini. Just watch out for maybe being too excited with what's going on in your relational life, too maybe not grounded. This is an air sign, remember, we get lost in the head, especially with attraction. Sometimes we kind of tell ourselves stories, or who we think a person should be, or who we think they are. And it's good to kind of stay grounded and deliberate, enjoy things and have fun, but make sure, we're not losing ourselves so fast, so quickly. That can set up for a fall, And remember, Mercury is also the sign of kind of things not being what they seem. Things shift and change. It's an energy of youth. Youth, think about when you were young. I remember there was a phase, I grew so fast with a growth spurt. I mean, I was changing shoe sizes every 6 months, and I looked different, my voice changed. I mean, there's great changes all throughout our youth. And that is part of this playful, attractive energy. What we might be attracted to one week, that can shift and change as we get to know someone. We never really ever know people either. I mean, I don't mean to sound so pessimistic, but I think it's a constant process of becoming who we are, and then of learning who others are becoming. And so there's a shiftiness in the dance of relationship that I think should be embraced, giving ourselves room to change and the other people room to change, but especially early in an attraction phase. And I don't mean this to be a lecture about dating and relationship. I didn't even plan on talking about it that much. I just wanted to show you this is what this 6th lunar mansion can signify. And business, making alliances, friendship, these are all Gemini themes and mercurial significations. And one thing I just wanted to talk about briefly while we're here is how I use the tropical lunar mansions, the maybe Arabic, or these come out of an astrology in the Middle Ages and the Arab world. And there's roots, antecedents that probably go way farther back, but you can see here the name Al-Hana. They really get codified and established in that period. But this is how I like to use the lunar mansions. It's just a tip out there for you astrologers or astrology students. You'll find that every sign has at least one lunar mansion, sometimes more, that the totality of the borders of that lunar mansion are contained within one zodiac sign. And I find this to be a great way to study the significations of the signs of the zodiac, because these lunar mansions tend to line up. They often line up with what we think of as Gemini and Mercury. And you see that here: friendship, relationships, and business. That's all Mercury. The talking, the fun, friendship, alliances, that's agreements and business, so it's just a hint. As you study them, you'll find it's uncanny to how they reflect the power of a zodiac sign. So anybody who's into signology, I encourage you to go study these lunar mansions as a way to deepen your understanding of the significations of the signs. You might be able to use that in your horoscope writing, your meme creation. So good luck with that. But let's just shift here. So that's the Tuesday Gemini moon. And actually, I want to take a look at this, because even though it's not bona fide, or it loses that bonification here. Let's see, we were on the 6th. It loses the bonification once it gets about 7 degrees away from Jupiter. And you can see, so we're about right here. The bonification's gone as it's conjoining the North Node. But I'm also thinking this could be a pretty sweet transit when the moon begins to apply to Mercury. And the one thing about it that's, less useful or maybe less desirable is that even though this is a sextile with Mars and Leo, the moon will be carrying Mars's light as the last aspect it made as it starts applying to and perfects its application to ruler the moon. You can see this is why I use this. They call this a strip, a degree strip at the bottom. It's very easy to see here the moon. So there it is. It applied, it perfected the sextile to Mars. Now it's carrying Mars's light for about 9 degrees, 8 degrees into that application. So that's probably why I didn't pick that. I did look at this earlier. But still, if you want to get the moon here, right, like look at this with Mercury, I'll be able to get it here rising where I am on the 8th of July at 3 a.m. That might be something cool to, if I had a pressing election that I had to go do something or file some business or something. And this is one I would, maybe consider, if I was pressed out of everything that's going on, the moon applying to its ruler here in Gemini, away from the North Node. Jupiter would be in the 10th house. Mars and Saturn aren't involved at all. And the ruler of the moon is quite strong, Mercury. So, and you can see how I think. I guess the point I'm making here is that I like that bona fide moon earlier in the transit in Gemini, but later in the Gemini transit, there's still some opportunity here if you want to go for this Gemini moon this week. Okay, so let me go to back to the PPT. Let's shift over now Wednesday. This will be 4 in the morning here, Central Europe. I want to take a little bit more of a look at the Saturn-Venus opposition that happens on Wednesday. The one big thing to know about it is that Venus is in Saturn's Egyptian term, and Saturn is in Venus's Egyptian term. We call this a mutual reception because in this chart, Venus is filtering through Saturn energy. And the condition of Saturn, anytime Saturn rules a planet by any of the types of rulership, Saturn's condition will impact the planet. That is to say, the planet needs Saturn. It's relying on Saturn. And so in this chart, Venus relies on Saturn and Saturn relies on Venus. And so we say they need each other. And anytime you have two things needing each other, there is an incentive to work together. And that's why mutual receptions are so potent and so powerful. And in this case, I was thinking here, like at the beginning of the talk, I was thinking about how the opposites, like isolation and togetherness, Saturn isolation, Venus togetherness. And it's this continuum idea that I was referring to. But think about in your life, like I know for me, if I get too alone for too many days, I actually need people. I'll go out and find people to hang out with or chat with or talk to. As a way to modulate myself and figure out, where I am on that continuum. And at the same time, if I'm out too much and I haven't fed my solitary tasks that I can only do alone, for example, writing, I can't do that. I guess you could have someone write with you, but that's not, solitary writing can only be done by myself, or reading books that I'm studying. I have to spend time doing that. Prayer, meditation is a solitary task. If I'm around too many people for too many days, those are the food of my soul, these solitary tasks. I've got to leave those groups, leave the relationships, and come feed myself in that solitary way. And so I'll need a break. And so you can see this continuum here. I think this transit, because Saturn is relying on Venus and Venus is relying on Saturn, will be a way, even though it's an opposition and there could be some tension here, it's the kind of tension that will produce maybe realization or epiphany around where you may be at with your needs for other people, and how you're working with that flow between what you need and what you don't need. So look for that. It's a very auspicious moment, actually, in many ways, that Venus here does speak here with Jupiter and communicate with this mutual reception. Now, after this, Venus will, I believe, fall into being enclosed there for a day or two in between these malefic rays. So maybe this epiphany moment, there will be kind of in the wake of that, there may be some feelings of disconnection. Actually, let's just check that. This is again, I will throw up my solar fire. Let's see here. So in the days after, here's Venus now separating there from Saturn. And when does the Venus, it's not even until next week. It's not, let me go back here. See, Venus and Mars are moving together. So it's going to take a while for Venus to perfect the conjunction with Mars. But let's just check out, the moon will be breaking up. Okay, sorry, I'm just got to get clarified here. So here we go. Here's the moment of Venus opposite Saturn. Here's the next day. And you can see down here that Venus is in between Mars and Saturn. The sun is in aversion to Venus. So we don't count that as the sun being able to break up the enclosure. But the moon will break it up. So the moon comes here to break it up. Actually, this is an interesting day. This will be next Monday. But I think the moon doesn't quite break it up, or it does. But I think even at that point, we're out of the 7-degree range. But anyhow, after looking at this, it's clear that we have about 6 days of Venus maybe being really under some pressure starting on Wednesday. It's this moment of epiphany and exchange, and maybe we figure out where we are in terms of other people and our needs for other people. And then we have to sort of maybe reconstruct. This is how something like this may go. Maybe there's now telling people no, or asking people to hang out. Whatever you discover in response to this moment, then you may have to implement that with some changes and some acting differently in order to kind of honor what that very auspicious opposition may have offered you. So that's how I'll delineate that. Let me come back now to the PPT. And so that's all. I said this transit may bring up opportunities to explore the balance between self and other. And I like that. And between being alone and being with groups. So enjoy that and look for those opportunities. Now let's come to Saturday. This is the new moon. Happens here 3 a.m. in Central Europe on Saturday. It's like I said, let's just check it out here. Averse to Saturn and Mars. Beautiful. Saturn and Mars can't hurt this new moon at all. It's a birth of something without those really challenging and destabilizing energies. And I love it. Now the moon is ruled by itself, so the moon is very powerful. It's the moon's time. It's Luna's season to have a new moon during this summer moment, the beginning of summer. Mercury rules the Egyptian term. Mercury's strong in Gemini. So even though Mercury's not making the aspect, there's still a flavor of Mercury here. Remember what we talked about earlier when the moon was in Gemini, the playfulness, the friendship. I think that's coming into play with this new moon. Absolutely. So, and then the third thing to say, look at Jupiter. It's making the sign-based water trine, like I mentioned. So this chart is actually quite powerful in a way we might think of as so-called good, in terms of the ability for good energy and positive, hopeful things to flow in a chart like this. And Saturn and Mars aren't ruling at all this new moon. Now you might say Mars by triplicity, but let's not talk about triplicity. I as you guys can probably learn, I prioritize domicile and term, and maybe I like exaltation rulership, but it occurs less likely. The reason why I like domicile and term is that they're more evenly spread out. So even though term dignity is only 5 of the 7, it is still fairly consistently spread out and evenly divided. And every degree has a term ruler, whereas every degree does not have an exaltation ruler. Every degree does have a triplicity ruler, but that's just a different, let me just say this way, in the ancient texts I've read, the triplicity rulership scheme is very much about certain styles of techniques, whereas you'll find way more often Egyptian terms being equated with domicile rulership for purposes of techniques. Like Firmicus Maternus always says things like, if it's in its own sign or term, then this technique applies, or then this statement that he's going to say after applies. So I've kind of taken that on, I equate them, and I'm coming out with a whole essay on the terms, probably next year at some point. Maybe I'll get to it this year, but I'm going to detail all of that. So it's one thing people often ask me about, well, what are the terms, how do you use them? Well, I will hope to rise to that challenge, rise to that the task there and be able to explain and offer my wisdom to you guys on that, and gals and folks. So, all right, so let me come back here. So you see how the configurations are very promising in this new moon moment. And all I have here is that, expansion, hope, good tiding, love, play, nurturing, all have a chance to take center stage, not only for this moment of the new moon, like for a new moon ritual you're going to do, but for this whole 2 week of the syzygy energetic, that the syzygy casts a shadow over the next 2 weeks, or sends its energy into the next 2 weeks, such that these 2 weeks will be defined by this very auspicious birthing moment. And I have, what are you gestating to bring to life? That's what the moon is. The moon is the mother. The moon is the things we protect because we love them and we care for them. And maybe that's where the Mars triplicity rulership comes in here. So at nighttime in water signs, Mars does rule by triplicity. And I know this is not going to be night all over the world. That's the other thing about triplicity rulership. It's shifting depending on if it's daytime or nighttime. So it's one that's less, I guess, uniform. Like I said, the Egyptian terms always are the same everywhere in the world, and every degree has one. And the other forms of dignity, now face dignity is a whole other thing, or Decan dignity. That's true for Decan dignity, but Decan dignity doesn't have the kind of common appearance in the older texts. It's more of a magical, and it's sort of it's segregated out. I love the Decans. I use them more in my tarot work. I find the Decans to be quite powerful for the cartomancy and the tarology. All right, so this is what I'm thinking. It's like this is a time for these 2 weeks to love things, nurture things, hold things close to you, be nurtured by or nurture during this summer period, right? We're in the dog days of summer here, so-called. I saw some tweets about that. I think Amaya O'Rourke in Ireland was tweeting about the dog days coming up here, and we'll be in the dog days here because it's when the moon and Sirius, well, technically the dog days are, I think, the 23rd of July in some of the older calendars, so we're not quite there yet, but the sun does make a conjunction to Sirius about 15 degrees Cancer, so earlier in the week before this new moon. And that's heliacal rising of Sirius in Egypt did usher in these summer moments of the flooding of the Nile, and it was very important to their spiritual systems. Okay, so let me come back here. This next slide. The womb feels comfortable. I was just meditating on this idea of, why does the mother come from Cancer? Why is the moon implying the mother? And there's a sense of comfort in the womb. Your needs are completely met, ideally. Let's say you have a healthy mother that's taking care of the baby. That baby is in the womb, in the amniotic sac, and just basically plugged in to food and just hanging out, completely taken care of. I think this is why we cry. I know this is not what scientists would tell you, but I think there's some kind of explanation here when we come out of that womb and we're crying, because I think we know at some deep level that we're going to have to fend for ourselves, that easy street is finished. And we'll have to become the mothers and the nurturers and the protectors of other people and other things. But we lose that easy street. The thing about life, though, is there's always pockets or moments of energy where we can return to womb-like activity. This week, I remember it was like 1 hour or 2 hours. I think one of the days this week, I just went on my bed and I curled up, and I thought exactly, God, this must have been what I was like in the womb. I was like in a very similar position. And I was like, God, this feels good. And I actually took a little nap, and I really needed it, So we can kind of recapture that sense of comfort and home and nurture, but that's only one mix of the energies with all the energies of life that don't include that, So I think that's part of why we cry a little bit. We have to kind of shift out and shift into our role as human beings and do the things we're here to do. But what brings you comfort? Who comforts you? They talk about the lazy summer days. I'm feeling that. It's so hot, just kind of put on the AC and then just lay back, take some naps. And in August, I know that this 2 weeks does not include any August, but people go on vacation in Europe, especially in August. I think there's some of that energy that we can maybe do an early vacation here, or captures, like chill out on the weekends during this this syzygy, this new moon in Cancer that's so auspiciously configured. Might want to capture some of that rest and leisure and chill energy for what I'm calling here the lazy days of summer. They may be here now because of this Cancer energy. Now, you don't necessarily think of the sign of Cancer as lazy per se, but you might think about it more as like kind of out there and initiating things to protect, doing things that you might, like cleaning the bed or changing the bed so it's more comfortable. It's an initiation energy. This is what the cardinal signs are. So maybe there's some of that too. And remember, it's ruled by Mercury, so maybe the playfulness around the home. Maybe you'll be out and more active, like playing in the yard in the summer. Or I remember when I was a kid, we had the lightning bugs. We'd go out and play with those. Some of those beautiful memories and images that come into the mind for me. All right, this is the last thing, is this fixed star Wasat that will be closely conjoined 46 degree minutes of this new moon. And this is the playful, childlike energy of this week is emboldened with this fixed star conjunction. The degree of Wasat on the ecliptic is, like I said, 46 degree minutes away from the new moon, but this is in the lower kind of stomach area or lower torso of the twins. It's hard to know if it's in the arm of one twin or in the actual stomach of the other. Let's see here. I never forget I can never remember their names. Anyhow, I'll have to get that up later date. Forgive me, astrologer, I should know the names of the twins of Gemini. Forgive me. Is it Castor and Pollux? I think it may be Castor and Pollux. Actually, I'll just look that up now. Why not? While you guys while you here, apologize to make you wait on here. I'll just take one quick second here. Names of the twins of Gemini. Let's see what the internet says. DuckDuckGo. I've been using the DuckDuckGo browser. I don't know if it's much better, but they say maybe it's better. So Castor and Pollux, the twin brothers of Helen of Troy. So we've got these twins here, Castor and Pollux, and I guess. All right, so I'm not a bad astrologer. So anyhow, Wasat. So I wanted to pull up Manilius here. Manilius is the great poem Astronomica from right around the turn of the into the Common Era. And he's got a whole thing here, very poetically writing about the twins, less laborious callings, an agreeable way of life, songs and voices, and they even find work a pleasure. And so there's this sense of childlike playfulness with the constellation here, where this fixed star is embedded. Now, Ptolemy and some other writers talk about Wasat maybe having a Saturnian tone, but actually they don't. It's hard to know because they say the lower the stars in the thighs, and we're not sure. I'm not quite sure about Wasat, so I'm just going with the energy of the Gemini constellation itself, and that's how I work with fixed stars. Often you have an energy of you step into the mythology of a constellation, a story. These are stories that cultures have put into the sky. And so we're accessing really the whole of that story. One thing to mention is that Mercury being in Gemini is that Saturn by triplicity, by day triplicity, rules Gemini. So there is a component to Mercury's placement in the air sign Gemini of a Saturnian style component. And maybe if you think about fun and games, where does Saturn come in? Well, we have parents watching over us when we're children. I mean, there's parks all around where I am. There's kids playing. There's always parents, and that's the job as the parent, the Saturn, to contain the play so that it doesn't go out of the bounds and maybe become potentially harmful. So maybe that's something to just think about is this wonderful, nurturing, playful new moon, but maybe we need to make sure that we're, who's the parent in the room? Something to contemplate. Who's going to play the role of mom or dad or grandmother or grandfather or grandparent or just parent? Who plays that role? And, let's not get too much fun, right? No, I'm just kidding. I want to have as much fun as we can, but life will come back. There'll be, like next week's astrology, maybe it's going to be really challenging and really rough. And just on the horizon, I'm going to close the weekly astrology with this, Saturn coming back into Aquarius to conjoin, Jupiter coming back into Aquarius to conjoin Saturn is on the horizon at the end of July. So we're shifting back into some of that more serious tonality with what Jupiter can bring. Maybe that's what this is also pointing to with Saturn's role in terms of the tonality of Wasat embodying some Saturnian energy. All right, that's the weekly astrology. Let's pull some cards here quickly to add some context and add some more energy to the week ahead. All right, the first card is, okay, interesting. Let me just pull this up. I'll take 1 second. Here we go. The first card is, okay, a sword. The moon in Aquarius, the indecision card. Interesting. So I was just talking about Aquarius. This is the past here. I'm wondering whether the moon here in Aquarius, you know what I think about when I see this is that epic new moon in February. It's been coming up this week, unsurprising, right? Because we had the pile up of 5 planets in fixed signs. That new moon in February had 6 of the 7 traditional planets in fixed signs. But I'm seeing that's coming up with folks as a big marker for this year. Things that happened around that new moon really kind of triggered us into the 5 months of Jupiter and Saturn. That was really the moment that I think we were most maybe saturated in Jupiter and Saturn's energy in conjunction. And then we were kind of in the traveling in the wake of that with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and co-presence until May 15th. Now we come back into it. So just think about your first 5 months. That's what I'm going to go with this. It's just, I've been telling people and reading this, thinking about it myself. What were those first 5 months of the year with Jupiter and Saturn co-present in Aquarius like? I mean, how were you, did you enjoy them? Did you have momentum on some projects? I know I did. I had some great things happening and going on, and I can't wait for a lot of that energy to have a new chance to re-engage that energy. It was a really cool moment, actually, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed Jupiter and Saturn being together. I think they really work together as triplicity rulers of the day sect. So of the day sect, it's Jupiter and Saturn, the greater malefic and the greater benefic with the sun. And then you have with fire signs, they are also part of that triplicity team. So I think, and I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but it was just an awesome opportunity to the 2 great planets joining. Maybe we can do some great things. So maybe consider what's unfinished, or what, if you had to return to some of those dynamics from the first 5 months, how would you want to modify or do it a little bit differently in the future? The moon here is feeling, the moon here, they have this indecision. The moon in Saturn is always a cool, cold, sort of uncomfortable energy. Sometimes it's best to wait on things while the moon is in Aquarius. But let's just move on. I think this notion of thinking about those first 5 months is really feels complete, just to share that thought with respect to this reading. It is in the first position of the past. Second card is, all right, this will be one of the knights. I believe it is the Knight of Hearts. Let me see here. And yes, it is. It is the Knight of Cups. Knight of Cups. I think there was a Terrence Malick movie called The Knight of Cups with Christian Bale. I saw that. Very poetic cinematography, like most of late Malick. It gets even more sort of nonsensical and abstract, but there's some real beautiful scenes in that where he's with Brian Dennehy and they're dancing in this like father-son thing and grieving, and this whole father-son sort of, intense, emotional, energetic. And I guess we could just, think about that picture. It's like sometimes with if you're too kind of stern, and maybe this is back to Venus and Saturn, pointing us to Venus and Saturn this week, because I think about, we have to put on our game face and go in the world and be serious and be businesslike and get things done. That's all Saturn, this kind of serious quality. It's useful, it's very useful, and it's very powerful. But that we do have to kind of let the shell sort of come off. Maybe this is also Cancer new moon this week. Jupiter and the trine to the new moon in Cancer, the water trine. That's the emotions, that's the hearts, that's the cups. And so where can we get soft? Where do you need to be soft? I know I was thinking this week, just trying to feel some emotion, like some sadness. I was thinking about my family, you know, my dad, my brother, they're back in Texas, and just, you know, feeling love, just feeling love for my family, and just giving myself some permission and space to just get soft and get in touch with that, like, part of me that loves other people and that wants to hug and hold and be grateful for how much love I receive from my family, you know. I'm fortunate to have a good family. We have a good relationship now. Hasn't always been that way in my adulthood, but we've come into a really nice dynamic. So I just think about this as like the emotional softening, letting the cry out, telling people you love them, you know, expressing your love and care and concern. That's also all about a Cancer new moon. I mean, we hold people. Nurture, I think so much is about the touch of nurture, but then the verbal, I love you, I care for you, telling someone that. An open-hearted, verbal, you know, fusillade onto someone. Just kidding, not a fusillade, but just you know, encasing others in kindness through words. And remember that new moon is ruled by Mercury and Gemini, so I think there is a verbal component to the emotion, and that we can step into. I like seeing this card. I think I may call my dad and express even more love than I did on Father's Day. Maybe that's what I need to do. So anyhow, that's the tarot reading. That's the weekly astrology. Thank you for being here. Very glad to engage in the symbols of this week with you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. You can go to my website, sjanderson144.com. You can support me on Patreon, sjanderson144.com on that platform. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and have a lovely, lovely week ahead.